Okay. All right. Well, with Derek, with your permission, I'm going to start us off. Head nod. Okay. All right. Well, my name is Rachel Rosekind. I always forget to start with that. And I want to just welcome everybody to Abolition Visions and Intersections, Centering Human Relationships and Building Institutional Connections for Social Justice. And I want to say that this summit has been a long-time dream of mine, and it's been a tremendous pleasure and privilege to organize it. I'm just thrilled to spotlight so many people doing amazing work in their local communities and at the national level to upend systems of oppression and racial injustice and build networks of care, creativity, and belonging. I'm also humbled by the response this program has inspired, which is a testament to how hungry people are for connection, collaboration, and expansion of conversations that bring us closer to healing, wholeness, and our reciprocal humanity. Audre Lorde said, "The fact that we are here and that I speak these words is an attempt to break silence and bridge some of those differences between us. For it is not difference which immobilizes us, but silence. And there are so many silences to be broken." Today, we hope to break some of those silences open. Abolitionism pushes at the perimeter of the possible to illuminate and activate the potential. It asks us to question the stories we are told and sold and radically reimagine who we are in relation to the state, our neighbors, our media, and ultimately ourselves. Abolitionism is about telling deep and uncomfortable truths so we can act responsibly and seed a more just and equitable future. It is about authoring new stories, for our stories cross borders or contain them. And most of the stories we tell in America contain and police the boundaries around deservedness, entitlement, and uplift, and describe personal blame for structural circumstance. We need new stories and storytellers, and you will hear from some of them today. Bernard Malamud believed that the purpose of freedom is to create it for others. I believe the same. And indeed, abolitionism asks us to abandon a polarizing social construct and create a new social contract that invests in community well-being and healing and centers the voices and experiences of those most harmed, marginalized, and rendered vulnerable by oppressive and punitive systems. Andre Gide wrote that one does not discover new lands without consenting to lose sight of the shore for a very long time. Abolitionism is a reorientation toward experimentation. It is a classroom for trust building, risk-taking, improvisation, visualization, and co-creation. An opportunity to dream together, a space to pose the whys, what-ifs, and whens. In alignment with this summit's theme, the sun is just rising where I am. Like the morning, abolitionism is about spaciousness, opening, promise, and new beginnings. The visionary Octavia Butler said, "There is no new order under the sun, but there are new suns." It's just coming up, so let's begin. Derek, please take it from here.
Thank you, Rachel. And hello, everyone. My name is Derek Wilmot, and I'm the moderator for this session. I'm joined today, as you already have met, Rachel Rosekind, who will be our chat monitor, and as well as with Rebecca Black, who is our Q&A navigator this morning. Welcome to the Abolitionist Visions and Intersections, a summit hosted by the American Library Association Social Responsibilities Roundtable, or SRRT. SRRT believes that libraries and librarians must center social responsibility by recognizing and helping to solve social problems and inequities to work for the common good. This particular session is focused on building landscapes for justice, activism, and investment. And we are joined today by Jordan Packer, who will be speaking on towards abolitionist land use activism. Will be a second session shortly after this one. And I'll introduce them in just in between here. Our session today will be recorded, and the recording will be available via the SRRT website by early April. Please keep your cameras and mics off unless you are a presenter. To enable captions, click More in the bottom right of the screen, then click Show Captions. Use the Q&A feature to pose questions and reserve chat to relay any tech issues, resource share-outs, or appreciation for our panelists. We hope to have time for Q&A after all our presentations have concluded. Please be respectful and extend care and compassion to yourself and others. This includes using person-first language when posing questions or sharing information in the chat. Please refrain from using dehumanizing language such as prisoner, convict, or ex-con, and instead use language which emphasizes the personhood of these populations, such as incarcerated person or formerly incarcerated person. Practice self-care as needed. Get up, stretch, walk around. This is going to be a long day. So thank you all. I will now go ahead and turn it over to Jordan Packer.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see and hear me? Just a thumbs up.
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, it's a joy to be the first speaker today. I'm really excited for this this summit. So my name is Jordan Packer, and today I'm going to present my project towards abolitionist land use activism. This project focuses on the use of performance art to build community self-determination and power. And so I really look at New York City, and New York City, as is true of a lot of other places, prioritizes profit over neighborhood character and resident input. And this sort of cookie cutter landscape is easy to reproduce and is profitable. And it creates a lot of tension between residents and profit. So land use activism presents an alternative where people can collectively exercise control and self-determination over shared land. So I really zoom into Gowanus, Brooklyn. Gowanus is a neighborhood in South Brooklyn that's highly sought after for rezoning because it has a relatively low population and low building density. And I just want to give you a feel for what Gowanus is like if you haven't been there. So here are some images to show you sort of the texture of Gowanus. And this is a collage I made of different photos I took in Gowanus that show, you know, it still has this industrial, low density character to it as an area. And the other thing that makes Gowanus really unique is that it's situated around the Gowanus Canal. And this was originally Lenape-Hoking, which is the homelands of the Lenape, and it was marshland. And due to its accessible location, industry really coerced the canal into an industrial hub in the mid-1800s. And these businesses really heavily polluted the canal. And today it's still in need of substantial cleaning to remediate this pollution. So here are some different angles of the Gowanus Canal to give you a feel for the region. So rezoning Gowanus has been discussed and disputed for the last decade. And in 2021, the Gowanus neighborhood plan was passed, and it approved increased residential, industrial, and commercial development for this area that I show with the red stripes that's on top of the canal there, which is in blue. But despite its ultimate passage, this decision was highly contested. And the land transformation caused heartbreak, hopelessness, and the grief of locals. But amid all of those really grim feelings, there's still space for shared hope, shared love of land, water, and each other. So today I want to tell you about the Land Use Intervention Library, which is a performance art piece in Gowanus that demonstrated collectivism and autonomy through the ephemeral takeover of a public street end. This public street end was the last place in Gowanus with full access to the Gowanus Canal at the dead end of 2nd Avenue. And With the passing of the Gowanus rezoning in 2021, this area is going to transform into a combined sewage overflow tank facility. And in fact, now in 2024, that transformation has already begun. So I want to read my own autoethnographic field notes from attending the Land Use Intervention Library to give you a feel for what this performance art piece meant to me and how it speaks to land use activism. And I'll pair this with images that I took when I attended. The industrial street is abuzz with people when I arrive. A recently erected fence now separates people from access to the canal. A group of musicians stand to the right of the street next to a large U-Haul truck with its cargo door open. When I arrive, the musicians are already playing loud, discordant noises. Attached to the brick building next to the musicians are two signs. The first reads, Land Use Notice, observation of living and non-living things encouraged. Beware of razor wire and uneven gradient. Pay attention to where the water meets the land, but don't fall in. And the second reads, Land Use Declaration. Autonomous beings of the last street end declare total independence from Greater Gowanus and thereby its rezone. In the center of the street, performers begin to silently construct a living room. A team of performers place a table, chairs, lamps, and a bookshelf atop a rug. After they set up the space, they make themselves at home as if this were their living room. They place and pull books off the shelves, they lounge in chairs, they lay on the ground, they read, they just exist in this space they've created. And in front of the living room, which you can't see in this photo, there were rows of folding chairs where audience members could sit, stand, and gather. So visitors were encouraged to join the library. They had library cards where you could join and to explore the surrounding area. And there was a bookshelf, which you can see in this image, that was filled with photos, posters, found objects, and archival materials about the last street end and Gowanus and the Gowanus rezoning. On the ground, there was a huge rolled out piece of butcher paper that had questions written on it that people had written themselves. Things like, why does development move so fast? What if we change the language from land use to land relation? Do you have the same fear and anxiety about our future or lack thereof? And so I found myself thinking about the Land Use Intervention Library often in the days and weeks that followed. I made this collage of photos that I took when I attended, and I got all of the photos soaking wet to try to capture some of the physicality of the place. And while this experience only existed for a short amount of time, it had a profound effect on me. And clearly I'm still talking about it today. So this is the point at which I introduce abolition. Drawing on abolition as a guiding framework explores the possibility of what we can create together. And as Ruth Wilson Gilmore often says, freedom is a place. So let's explore what that place looks like when it caters to people and not governmental rules for how to use space. And here at the Land Use Intervention Library, I saw how libraries are sources of community, information, empowerment, and freedom. So I introduce abolition as a guiding framework that encourages configuring new methods for change, developing a mutual relationship to land, and collectively taking control of our communities. Reform often sustains the system, a system built to marginalize, financialize, and overpower, whereas abolition creates lasting systemic change. And as is written by Dylan Rodriguez in his piece, The Magical Thinking of Reformism, abolition is not an outcome. Rather, it's an everyday practice, a method of teaching, creating, thinking, and an insurgent, fugitive, community-building project that exposes the pitfalls of reformist adventure. It demystifies reformism's cheap magic. And while abolition is grounded in abolishing the prison industrial complex, I find that its motives and directionality can be applied to things like land use activism and the simultaneous destruction of the systems that oppress us, surveil us, other us, and the creation of something new together. So using abolition to frame land use activism allows us to envision the relationship to land that we desire. And I built out these abolitionist principles of land use activism, drawing on a variety of movements, organizational principles, and ethics that were presented in interviews that I conducted with attendees, performers, and the organizer of the Land Use Intervention Library. So I want to move into what I learned from the Land Use Intervention Library as inspired by abolitionist ideology. The first piece is to interrupt the municipal logic. Using a space beyond its municipal intention is subversive. It demands attention, it draws interest. And a primary goal of the Land Use Intervention Library was subversive use of public space, taking over a space temporarily and using that space in an autonomous way. And when people come together and decide how to use the space themselves, it builds that collective imagination and community while pushing against the municipal logic that typically dictates what we're allowed to do in a space, like a street. And in a gesture to abolition, the Land Use Intervention Library aimed to create and not solely destroy. As the organizer, Nora Almeida, says, it's not about this kind of negative, like we're against this. It's really about we're autonomous in this space and the gesture of liberation or the possibility of liberation. Second, I learned the importance of creating a spectacle. Spectacle has a unique role to play in land use activism. People are drawn to the strange, to the weird, to the unfamiliar. And there's a spectacle in using a space in a subversive way. A spectacle generates curiosity. If people see some makeshift library in a part of Gowanus, in a part of Brooklyn, in Gowanus, they're going to be like, what the F is happening? What are they trying to say? What are they doing? Questions arise. When you see something peculiar, questions arise. And that's a quote from an interview that I conducted with a performer in this performance art piece. The third is the importance of honoring the land, transition, and erasure. Redevelopment, by definition, changes a neighborhood, and honoring the land transformation places those memories in the collective identity of place within its historical context. You know, neighborhood transformation leads to construction, jackhammers in the morning, fenced off sidewalks, the smell of paint, sawdust, a loss of bird chirps to start your day. And really, ultimately, transition is a time of dust. And this reality of dust came forward at the Land Use Intervention Library in one specific moment where performers shook out a living room rug. And one of the performers said in an interview, until the building stands, which can take 8 to 9 years, this neighborhood will be a place of dust and noise pollution. So the Land Use Intervention Library captured this transitioning environment and the erasure of history that commonly results from redevelopment. The fourth thing I learned is to cultivate collective power. Cultivating collective power is essential for the longevity of any community-initiated effort. And this means it's rooted in collaboration and self-determination, a non-hierarchical structure that really empowers each individual. And there should be low barriers to entry so that anyone can participate and get involved fairly easily. And so the Land Use Intervention Library was really a coming together of artists, musicians, residents, and curious people for the common goal of experiencing something together. And the organizer, Nora, says the event convened almost 30 artists. Almost all of them are from Gowanus or had a connection to land use struggles in the city. So to me, that was very cool that I could use my very small stipend or grant money to pay local artists to engage in transforming space as part of their own neighborhood. 5 is to experience and feel the physical place yourself. Walking the boundaries of a rezoning, sitting on a bench and observing, eating lunch in a local park, These are all vital experiences in understanding the physicality of place that will change with new zoning designations. And this embodied understanding of rezoning is essential. By physically experiencing a space, the complexities of its storied past, the land itself, the emotions behind it can coalesce. You know, rezoning is so often discussed in city documents, committee quarters, and through this like ether of email, but it's not understood in the physicality of place and what's going to change in the neighborhood. And so the Land Use Intervention Library really encouraged participants to get to know the last street end, the local ecology, the tides, and to become attuned to the physicality of place. And one of the attendees said, it was really good for me to understand what was happening there in a way I guess I wouldn't have known otherwise. When you read something, you can just forget it, but you go there and you have an experience with people, and then I feel like you understand it more thoroughly. And in addition to understanding and being physically present in a space, it's vital to feel the space. And the Land Use Intervention Library hoped to elicit an emotional reaction from its audience. As the organizer says, I just wanted people to feel something. So I wanted people to have some kind of emotional reaction to the transformation of the street end. And finally, creating joy as a function of activism. Land use activism must involve love and fun and joy. And to create lasting change, we have to incorporate our full personhood and allow activism to include a full range of emotions. So joy is an essential aspect of the activism that we can create. So people have continued to stay in community with one another after participating in the Land Use Intervention Library. One example of this is someone actually professionally recorded the audio at the last street end because one of the musicians was also a music producer. And so the sound performance was made into a limited edition cassette by the indie record label Sleeping Giant. So this is just one of the ways that people have continued to create together and to build other forms of media and community. So in conclusion, the Land Use Intervention Library shared these essential ways that performance art can, through everyday practices and moments that we share in community, build a new world. By interrupting the municipal logic, creating a spectacle, honoring the land, transition, and erasure, cultivating collective power, experiencing and feeling the physical place yourself, and creating joy. Community power can be built in creative, ephemeral ways. At its core, this project shows how we can collectively build the world we want to live in. And in the process of this project, I uncovered the ways that experimental performance art is essential in pushing forward land use activism. Policy reform is often touted as the route to concrete change, as the substantive wins that can alter the way we live. But as Angela Davis and others write in Abolition Feminism Now, it's visual culture, music, art, and fiction that shape the popular imagination in profound ways, outpacing changes in policy and law. And so I found performance art has the capacity to encourage new ways of thinking and to imagine a different world. Thank you.
And thank you, Jordan. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce everyone to Reetu, Mody, Christina Hollenback, Veronica Johnson, and Jordan Martinez-Mazurek, whose presentation is How Financial Activism Can Stop New Prison Construction. And I'll turn it over now to them.
Hi all, welcome. I'm going to be helping facilitate some of our speakers today, but the first thing I'd love for folks to do is actually just write into the chat what you think financial activism means. What we're going to talk about today touches on that idea that possibility is within collaboration, and it is within a place, and it has a long-standing memory that continues to affect both policy, it affects how we think about community research, and it affects what can happen for a community. And so what we're going to specifically look at is how do you stop new prison construction? What is the actual way of doing that? I'm going to have each of the speakers introduce themselves because we have a little bit of a short time. But the first person I'm going to pass it to is Veronica R. Johnson, who's going to tell us a little bit about herself as well as what was going on in Alabama. How did all of this start? Veronica, and I'll put up our slides as well.
Greetings. Thank you all so much for being here today. I seen someone drop in the chat that librarians are cool. So yes, I'm just glad to be here with you guys today. So like Reetu said, I am Veronica R. Johnson. I am born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. Spent most of my time here with the exception of the 4 years that I was in college, and I only went to Huntsville for that. I'm currently the deputy director of a small nonprofit here in Birmingham, where we focus on parole reform as well as civic engagement within the state of Alabama. So how did this all start? Most days I pick up my phone and I read AL.com, and it tells us the date. That's our daily news. So this particular morning when I picked it up, I saw that there were plans for 4 new prisons to be built in the state of Alabama. Not only were 4 new prisons to be built in the state of Alabama, they were going to privatize these prisons. Core Civic would be the person, or would be the people who would be in charge of the privatization of these prisons. So myself, along with LaTanya Tate, who is the co-founder, who is the founder of the organization that I work for, we got on a call and we said, no, this isn't going to happen, because 51% of the population of prisoners in Alabama, they tend to look like me. So the brothers and sisters that are on the inside tend to look like me, but we're only about 27 or 28% of the state of Alabama. So whereas the majority of the guys and girls on the inside look like me, the majority of the people walking around my state do not. So that was a conflict in and of itself. So we reached out to our national partners. We were able to bring Jordan on, among other people, to talk about our organizing strategy as how we were going to stop these prisons from being built. We reached out to community leaders in several of the communities in which they had pitched these new sites, one being Briarfield, Alabama. Born and raised again in Alabama, I had never in my life heard of Briarfield, Alabama. So we go to Briarfield and we talk to the community members there. Briarfield is an extremely deep red community. I'm pro-black, like I'm black, like I'm for real black girl. So I felt out of space and out of touch when I went to Briarfield. But the people in Briarfield respected me, one, because they had the same passion that I had, and two, what I didn't want, they didn't want either. So we were able to work together collectively with the residents of Briarfield. Also, we went to Elmore County. When I went to Elmore County, this was another place they had a site for the prisons. This guy had like this big, beautiful traditional home with the wraparound front porch, and we had our first meeting in his yard, and it was absolutely positively phenomenal. And on the other side of a tree farm, which I had no idea that trees were grown on a farm. Please don't hold that against me. But on the other side of the tree farm, there was the cotton field. And at the end of this cotton field is the place that they had said that this new prison would be built. So can you imagine a new prison being built on the edge of a cotton field in Alabama, where we are known to use prison labor on a daily basis, and the state takes somewhere about 40 to 60% of those guys on the inside, their income, and they give it back to the state. So we partnered with these community members in Briarfield. Again, both of these being deep red counties. We partnered. I didn't push my values on them, and they didn't push their values on me. But what we did know was that we'd gone to our politicians and we told our politicians what we didn't want, and they told us what they were going to give us. And so right now we're angry. We're not looking at the political roles. And one of the things that I like to say the most is that there's a lady in Briarfield by the name of Jackson Neely. Jackson is a Republican, and yes, I have to make this about party because we're at a time where most of the time people are looking at party and not necessarily the needs of the community. So Jackson is a Republican. I know I'm a Democrat, but guess what? From that day to this one, she supports me in every effort that we make. So we did a lot of organizing on the ground with community members, with other local organizations, other large organizations. So we had grassroots and grass tops organization trying to abolish these 4 prisons being built in Alabama, but we were missing something. We were missing something that we never knew that we needed. We never knew the impact that finances had on the prison structure. So we were able to reach out to Justice Capital, and they came in and they've been teaching me about finances and how they're applicable and what we can do to use finances to stop prisons from being built. So Jordan, along with myself and a couple of other coalition members, I'm sorry, I skipped a part. We created a coalition called Communities Not Prisons, and that included those grassroots and those grassroots organizations, as well as those grass top organizations. And so we put it all together. On the phone one day, it was Jordan, myself, and some of the other coalition partners, and we sent out hundreds of emails until we finally got in touch with the last person that we needed to stop these prisons from happening. And it was a financing company. The CFO reached out to us, and we gave them 48 hours to respond to our email. He responded to our email within less than 12 hours. Within 48 hours, we had a meeting with him. And it was amazing to me because I was a juvenile probation officer for most of my life. And so I never really got to bump elbows with the big wigs, right? And so now I'm on the phone with the CFO of a major corporation, and I'm getting to explain to him why we don't need a prison in the state of Alabama. And with that, we stopped 4 prisons from being constructed in the state of Alabama. So we did what we would normally do in community organizing, but we brought something in that we never knew we needed, and that was financial activism. And we coupled them together, and we stopped prisons from being built within the state of Alabama. I will pass it on to Christina, who will give you more details. But what we did was unprecedented. It was unheard of. It was something that has never been done before, but we laid the groundwork. We laid the foundation for many, many people to come and to stop many other places from getting new prisons and or jails within their communities.
Thanks. Thanks, Veronica. Before we pass on to Christina, I wanted to pull out a few pieces of Veronica's words. So one, Veronica worked with a group and is part of a group, helps lead a group called Investor Circle Towards Decarceration. That's who we are. And it's a mix of grassroots activists, leaders in public equities, as well as leaders in entrepreneurship and financial activism. And how do you engage financial actors to really stop prison construction? And this is key. In a capitalist society, thinking about finances as a tool is really important. The other thing I wanted to point out from Veronica's words, especially as we think about libraries of places as coalescing together, is Veronica went to the places where prisons were going to be built. She spoke to folks on the inside as well as the community on the outside. And Veronica crossed not just political party lines, but a number of historical lines that have existed in Alabama over time. A key part of our work is that collaboration. We don't move without listening to community first, and we always move together. So from Veronica's perspective, the thing she really pulled out is the organizers had all these amazing tools and they found another one. So I'm going to pass it to Christina to talk a little bit more about what does it look like to engage in financial activism. Christina?
Thanks, Reetu. Thanks, Veronica. And just want to thank Jordan and Derek and Rachel, for that opening. It was really, really dope to hear all of that. So my name's Christina Hollenback. I'm the CEO and founder of Justice Capital. I'm also the co-founder of the Investor Circle Toward Decarceration. And, you know, as Reetu and Veronica were sharing, financial activism is not something new, I would say, but it is something new in terms of bringing it into the conversation and bringing investors back into relationship with the impact of their investments in mass incarceration, because all this stuff has been financed. As you can see from this picture, prisons are financed publicly and privately, right? They're invested in not just with municipal dollars. They're also invested in with private equity, with venture capital, right? So all of these different integrated systems around financing, they all weave together into what we see today, whether it's through surveillance, through you know, paying for the actual facilities, and everything in between. And so financial activism at its root targets the financing of systems of harm and also systems of good, right? And that's why I love everybody's notes in the chat, because you're spot on. That's exactly what's going on. But the truth is that the public carries the cost of mass incarceration. So while the criminal legal industry is like $250 billion, even before COVID, the industry of mass incarceration was costing us. It was an economic drag of $1 trillion in lost wages, in harm, in the potential of the best of us, the best of our communities that has been lost to mass incarceration. And so as we look at disrupting the financing of mass incarceration, we don't want to let that go off the hook. We know this is harming all of our communities, all of our people, and also there is a different way that all of this could be financed. We actually could be financing libraries, educational institutions, clean energy infrastructure, so it's not 70 degrees one day and 20 degrees the next day. All of these things are things that we could be investing in through the same dollars that we're spending to invest in mass incarceration. But also I want to talk a little bit about how the investor circle came together in a different way. So investors are used to never having to pay for the consequences of their action. They're used to never seeing the person who is harmed in their eye. And so what the investor circle does is we just bring investors back into relationship with the investments that they've made and that they are potentially going to be making. So the investor circle actually doesn't just focus on what our outcome is, which is obviously to stop the financing of new prisons and actually reroute those funds into reparative infrastructure, but also it's the how of what we do. It's the fact that we actually are training investors to be back in relationship and in right relationship, where we're listening and centering the communities who are the most impacted. So the Communities Not Prisons Coalition was a vital part of our work, as was all of the work that folks did in the uprisings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, for Mike Brown, for Freddie Gray. All of that built a consciousness that that we really engaged inside of investors and gave them a pathway to be able to engage, to stop financing and take action in their realm of work. So these structures can be financed differently, but we have to be very methodical about how we're supporting. For example, Alabama's case was a municipal bond that we were disrupting. You have to be able to really organize municipal bond investors and be very strategic in that inside-outside game with community. So anyway, come and talk to us. We'd love to chat with you more if you're interested in learning more about this. But it's really been an honor to chat with you all, and also obviously always an honor to walk with Veronica, Jordan, and Reetu.
Hey y'all, and I'm seeing a few chats before we pass it to Jordan. A few comments in the chat I just wanted to pull out. So like Christina said, the way Investor Circle works is we work really deeply connected with community on the ground, but also with investors. And as someone put also in the chat, putting them back in right relationship with actually what they're doing with their financing, right? And I think that's a key component as you think about, well, how do I get involved? What can my community do? Where can we start making investments into Alabama's libraries instead of the prisons, right? As we think about these questions, it's really important to think about who are we in right relationship with and how are we engaging in that relationship? And with that, I'm going to pass it to Jordan, who's going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like across communities, across state boundaries, and what does it look like to organize together in right relationship. Jordan?
And thank you, Reetu. And I really want to like bring it home for us. And I think that example in the chat of like the Alabama prison system versus the library system is really instructive, especially for this audience. In 2020, the total state aid provided by Alabama to the Alabama Public Library Services was $5.5 million, right? Now, that same year, the total state budget going towards the Alabama Department of Corrections was $540 million. 100 times almost the amount of money being put into prisons that were not being put into libraries, right? And needed vital community resources. And this is on top of the 3.5-ish billion dollars they were trying to use to build the new prisons, right? Right now, across the country, there is a new wave of prison, jail, juvie, detention center construction happening because we're 40 to 50 years post the start of the prison boom, post the start of mass incarceration, and buildings do not live inevitably, right? Buildings deteriorate. And right now we're reaching the end of life of prisons across the country that were built at the start of this boom, which means we have a critical moment to intervene here. We're either going to let our states, our municipalities, our cities invest billions of dollars in new prisons, or we can fight to do something else, right? And so I really encourage y'all to go and just Google prisons being built in your city, in your town, jails being built, find where this new construction is happening and find who's fighting it, right? And in addition to that, we're hoping to get y'all some new tools that you can use in your fight against these projects. We have a community toolkit. If you're like me, hey, I've been on the Community Advisory Council for the Investor Circle for going on 2 years now. I still don't understand all this bond shit. I'm gonna be real with y'all, right? But we're hoping to translate a lot of the knowledge from our investor friends into work that, shout out to people DMing me in the chat, into work that can be digestible for folks on the ground. And this is sort of our first attempt at communicating some of this stuff, these series of events we're doing. And so if you would like to get a copy of that toolkit when it comes out, please go to www.decarceration.com/join us. Just type in, yo, I want this toolkit. Also, if you're a researcher, we're looking for community-based researchers to get involved with us in studying the finances of incarceration and where is this money going and what is the actual return on investment of investing in libraries versus investing in prisons, right? What's the negative return on investment in terms of investing in prisons? So please reach out to us, please, decarceration.com. I don't believe we have any social medias. And I'll pass it over to Reetu to close us out.
Thanks, y'all. There's so much to say on this topic, and we would love to connect with y'all. But as we're closing out, I would love to hear in the chat from folks what really stood out to you, what's striking you, what's holding your heart, what questions do you have? Because for us, as we think about how do we get investors all over the country, communities all over the country involved to really stop prison construction and to reinvest into communities, right? Into community ownership, into what really matters to people, into libraries, there's a role for everyone. And that's one of our takeaways is just, there is always a role, there's always a way to be involved in this work and in a better future. So thank you so much, Rachel, Derek, Christina, Veronica, Jordan, and everybody who's been really engaging in the chat. We're so glad to be here, and we would love to hear more from you too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all our presenters, and thank you for attending this morning as well. Our next session is going to start in about 10 minutes or so. So we might be able to squeeze in one question before 10:50, or at the 10-minute hour, 10 minutes before the hour there. if we'd like to do that. So this is going to be just one question now for Jordan Parker. Did you come away with thoughts on how community memory can survive rezoning outside of performance or installations?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think so. In Brooklyn, New York, I also volunteer at a place called Interference Archive. And if you aren't familiar with Interference Archive, the point of that space is to create an archive of paper materials from social movements. And it really, there's a lot of ephemera that's collected in those kinds of spaces. And this question really makes me think of Interference Archive, because I think in a lot of ways, the goal of a space like that is to collect some of these things that are often lost to time and create a space of community around remembering. And Interference Archive as a place really aims to survive beyond rezonings and to document the changes of land. And so I think that's one thing that comes to mind. And also just having events like this really, like, it makes people pay attention to what's happening or what the lived experience has been before. So I think that those are some ways that community memory can survive outside of the ephemeral.
Thank you, Jordan. So again, thank you to all our presenters, and thank you everyone for attending. Our next session starts in about 9 minutes. It is Inside Out, Lived Experience, Carceral Realities and Public Knowledge. And the same Zoom room, so just hang on. We'll be switching over fairly soon and getting our new speakers up shortly. So we encourage you to stick around if you have time. Thank you.